enter what you might call the golden age of barbershop history, and that was towards the end of the 1800s, after the recording industry started up, because it had been showcased on in minstrel shows and in vaudeville with this dual vaudeville circuit of black and white, very popular on both. But then when the recording industry started up, there was even more exposure of barbershop to people across the country, and people were buying records and playing them in their home. So it brought the entertainment, not the practice of barbershop, but the entertainment away from out of the stage and into people's parlors. I was showing you these slides about famous African Americans who sang barbershop as youths, and there was one that was out of order that I wanted you to see. This is Jelly Roll Morton, a name you may have heard. He was a Creole African American from New Orleans, along with Bichet and Louis Armstrong and a whole bunch of others, when jazz really kind of began at the early part of the 20th century. And recalling his barbershop quartet, the boys had some beautiful harmony, they sang. And of course we got together and made all kinds, typo there, of crazy ideas of the harmony, and I like this part, which made it beautiful and made it impossible for anybody to jump in and sing. So that's the way we are, right? They didn't sing the song in a normal way. They jazzed it up and spiced it up with all kinds of chords, so it would be impossible for somebody to sing along, because they hated that, and don't we hate that today? And now I wanted to show you this. This appeared in the newspaper. This I got out of Lynn Abbott's article. It appeared in the Indianapolis Freeman, which was an African-American newspaper. And the reviewer was a fellow named Tom the Tattler. That was just his name, his pen name. He was a black man, all right? But he was a person who was very much interested in the arts and the African Americans' participation in the arts and being recognized as legitimate. And you can tell from this that he is very much of the opinion that this barbershop harmony was dragging the race down. So he says a noticeable advancement, and get the date, this is 1900, a noticeable advancement along the lines of the profession is the passing of the barbershop quartet with its barbershop harmony. It doesn't take much of an effort of memory to recall when all quartets sang their own self-made harmonies with their oft-recurring minors. Now, minors did not mean what we mean as a minor chord. It means altered tone. So in the old songs, people say, love to hear those minor chords. There's no minor chords in there. No, there's altered scale tones. That's what the minor meant, okay? So the minor chords, the baritone, go up to do sharp, that's a minor. All right, so they're oft-recurring minors, diminished sevenths, and other embellishments. This barbershop harmony, although pleasing to the average ear, and not altogether displeasing to the cultivated ear, is nothing more or less than a musical slang. It violates, at times ruthlessly, the exacting rules and properties of music. All forms, phrases, and progressions of music go down before it. What does the barbershop exponents of harmony care for such delicacies as the forbidden progressions of perfect fifths and octaves? What do they care about chord progression in its correct form? Their chief aim is to so twist and distort a melody that it can be expressed in so-called minors and diminished chords. The melody is literally made to fit their small stock of slang chords instead of the chords being built around the melody. And it should be said that not only this form of music underwent that kind of criticism, but also other forms such as ragtime, blues, and jazz. Ragtime was a derogatory term given by formal musicians who felt like these musicians couldn't hit the beat, which of course they could. They chose not to, but they could. They were fantastic musicians, but it struck formal musicians as a kind of musical slang. Raggedy. It's ragged. Okay? Not hitting the beat purposely, of course. So there you have it. I mean, and I think it's very interesting that in 1900 he's saying that the Barbershop Quartet is on its way out with African Americans, which may well be, because when the recording industry started up, of course, most of the recording artists are white. So this whole thing of male quartet began to be viewed as a white thing. And of course, white people, of course, practiced it, even back then. But its identification with the white man was pretty much intact by the 1920s, so that James Weldon Johnson, it behooved him to write, hey, wait a minute, this is being associated with white people, but I remember the day when every four, you could pick up any four black young men and they formed a quartet. So there was a change in stereotyping of barbershop quartet. And I should say something about the word barbershop, the term barbershop, because, and this will come up later, it did come to us from England, that's for sure. But the barbershop quartet got identified with the black quartet. The white quartets that recorded did not call themselves barbershop quartets, and when there was reference to barbershop, as we'll see, as in the 1910 song Play That Barbershop Chord, the stereotype was not a bunch of white guys, it was black guys. So the barbershop quartet may well have been the African American quartet. The white quartet singing what we would call barbershop was the male quartet. The Illinois harmonizers called it close harmony quartet. They didn't use barbershop either. Thomas Edison. All right, now we get to transformation of society. So in 1876, he actually made two inventions the same year. So one of them was a curious thing. They had photography, and he was able to make pictures, transfer them onto sort of a translucent or transparent sheet of paper or whatever, and then it became translucent, so that if you shined a light through it, it would project the picture on a wall. That probably wasn't new. But probably what was new is he took a series of pictures, all right, and put them on a gizmo so that when you turned a crank or something, the series of pictures fell down, this one went out, and the next one came down, okay? So you had this kind of effect, going very, very fast, faster than the eye could see the changes. You shine the light through it, and on the wall, you have the image of motion picture, okay? Okay, that was called the kinetograph, is what he called it, the motion picture camera, a motion picture projector, I guess. Now, everybody looked at that and thought, well, that's cute, but there's probably not much commercial value for it. The same year, he came up with another invention, and this one's more clever, really, when you think about it, technologically at least. He took a cylinder and he covered it with wax, so malleable cover. He wrapped it in tin foil. He mounted it on a spindle this way so that when you turned it with a crank, it didn't just turn this way, it went this way, so it spiraled, all right? Then he took a big horn that came down to a small circle, and he put a rubber diaphragm across the circle. He stuck a pin through it, and he mounted it so that the pin was pricking the tin foil, just barely. And then he stood in front of the horn, and he turned the crank, and he recited, "Mary Had a Little Lamb." He got done. He unwound the cylinder. He put the pin back where he had started. He stood aside from the horn and turned the crank. And there was his voice reciting, "Mary Had a Little Lamb." Now that's pretty clever if you think about it. That's a clever invention. And this one, unlike his kinetograph, was viewed as something that had great commercial value. Because if you could take that cylinder and somehow mass produce it, learn how to make a negative or a master and make a mold, you could sell it to people and they could have music in their homes. And that's exactly what happened. So in the 1890s, the motion picture industry sprung up. This is a picture taken much, much later. As you can see, the photo was made in 1943. This fellow you'll see later. This is a much older version of him, though. This is Billy Murray. He was the lead of the American Quartet, one of the most popular recording quartets in the early part of the 20th century. And he's demonstrating how they used, in 1943, how they used to record back at the turn of the century. So you see the horn, the artist stands there. If there's an orchestra, they're behind him. If there's more than one singer, like a quartet, they sort of huddle around that thing. There's no stereo, and so it's just ambient room sound. And this thing is taking his voice and making a master, except you see that it's not a cylinder, but rather a disc. Somewhere around 1904 or 1905, they changed from cylinders to discs, so now it spirals in, as you know. I know you all have never heard of records, but I grew up playing these things. You put the needle on the outside, and as it plays, the needle works its way inward to the middle. Okay. Yeah. It's like a CD. Yes. Exactly. What's a CD? So anyway, now why would they have changed from cylinders to discs? Storage. You get a bunch of cylinders, they're big and clunky. It takes a huge cabinet. If you have, you know, a collection of 200 of them, if you've got discs, you stack them up. So storage was it. So this was viewed as superior technology because of that, more commercially valuable. And so he's making a master on a disc, is what he's demonstrating here. And there's the studio technician. He's not behind glass. He's just standing there, making sure everything's working. This is an early recording. 1893. It is an African American group. There were so many around. Somebody probably went out in the street and got one, went on the street corner and found one. You guys come in here and record. I don't know that's the case. But this is the Unique Quartet, and the song is actually a new song at the time. It was published maybe let's see, does it say there? 1886. So anyway, this is kind of rare because it is an African-American quartet. We're going to be listening to many quartets, and for the most part, they're white singers. But this is kind of interesting. Not a lot of harmonic variety in this recording, and it's pretty scratchy, as you might imagine. It's off of a cylinder. And it has been cleaned up a little bit. I found one on the internet. You can find all kinds of these recordings, by the way, on the internet if you just start looking around. And many of them have been electronically enhanced, so they're still scratchy, but not as bad as they were. So here we go. Let's listen. Oh, and by the way, there is an announcer. Many of the early recordings started with a voice introducing the artist. So you will hear somebody saying, "This is the celebrated Unique Quartet," and they're singing Mama's Black Baby Boy.
Record 694, Mama's Black Baby Boy.
Record 694.
Sung by the celebrated Unique Quartet. I do know the lasses from over the jail. I'm a Mama's Black Baby Boy. I still know that all over myself. I'm a Mama's Black Baby Boy. He would send me to school most every day. I'd pick up my books and I'd run away. And when I come home, my mama, she would say, "What would she say, honey? I'm a little black baby boy."
So you notice a couple things. The call and echo. The lead singer sings something by himself, just naked solo. The others join. And also the lead twice sang the entire verse completely by himself. Now this notion of featuring the lead and having the lead be the centerpiece of the quartet really seems central to our style. It really does. You know, we hang this harmony on a melody, and it requires a charismatic voice singing the lead. That seems to go back to day one. This is one of the many popular recording quartets that came to be. These guys in the 1890s, as you see there. This is one version of them. By the way, they changed personnel quite a bit. And they even subbed for each other. They were studio singers. So studio singers, you know what they do. If somebody's sick that day, you call in somebody else. You still have to have your session. So you never really knew whose voice was on any given recording. Plus, there's another twist to this. Those masters were very fragile in the early days. And in the early days, the master only made about 100 copies. So if a song was a hit, the artist had to stay in the studio and record the same song, maybe for a week every day, you know? So if you get two different recordings of the same song with the same number, they may well not be the same artist, or they may be the same artist but at a different time of day. So people who are really crazy about collecting these things and studying them get multiple copies of any one recording and try to hypothesize that, well, they sound kind of froggy, so this was in the morning, or they sound tired, so this is in the afternoon. Okay, here's a early recording by the Haydn. By the way, they said Haydn, even though it's named after Haydn. There's a nice suspended chord, the kind we're starting to hear again nowadays. Complete with turn of the century tag. That's definitely Barbershop. It was not an old song, it was a new song at the time. I should say though that many of these quartets recorded songs that were old at that time, songs from the Civil War, Stephen Foster songs. These songs were 40, 50, 60 years old. So that raises the question of what songs do barbershoppers sing? Do we sing old songs or do we sing new songs? Yes. That's one of the revelations that's really dawned on us recently, because we went through a long period in the 60s and 70s when it was believed that every barbershop song should sound like it was written between, say, 1905 and 1925. And yet, we've just seen that a huge part of barbershop history was already gone and waning by that time. So there was a huge piece of our history that was in the past at that time. And as a matter of fact, those songs that came out at that time were viewed as newfangled songs that would be rather difficult for a quartet to harmonize. I can remember talking to Glenn Howard, who first got introduced to barbershop in 1919. And he got hooked on barbershop on the song Bright Was the Night. Some street corner quartet taught him the bass. And this was in Springfield, Illinois. And he got hooked on barbershop for life. He sang baritone in the quartet that placed second to the Bartlesville Barflies in 1939. They were the Capital City Four. Anyway, I was asking him in the 1920s, what songs did you sing? Because he had a quartet. He said, well, any old songs. We sang some old songs. What do you mean by old song? Oh, I've Been Working on the Railroad. That's from the 1800s. That's an old song. And we tried to sing new songs too. He said, those were tough. And like what? Well, like 5'2", Eyes of Blue. Now, that's a hard song. You know, that doesn't barbershop very well, but we were good at it and we could do it. Yeah?
It's awesome.
It's all in your perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's like I get amused by people saying, "Oh, we're singing all these new songs." What do you mean new songs? Oh, like 8 days a week. Okay, that's 50 years old. All right. Let's see. All right, maybe I have another sound bite here. There's another one. When I carved your name on the tree. Again, really good embellishments. Pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff. Interesting twist on the Haydn Quartet. They recorded for different labels. And so when they recorded for someone like Victor or Columbia, they used their name, the Haydn Quartet. But Thomas Edison had formed his own recording studio and recording company. And when they recorded for him, he wanted them to be called the Edison Quartet. So it was the same quartet, but they were the Edison Quartet. So what we're going to do is listen to a series of these recordings. So this will take a little bit of time because I want you to hear what was happening at the turn of the century. And I should say that these quartets, the Haydn Quartet and two others that I will introduce you to, were very popular quartets. When the recording industry started up, some of the top recording artists were male quartets. Later, there were some female quartets, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But you should understand that who were the big recording artists? Well, there was people like Caruso, okay, and other classical artists. There were orchestras, but there was quartets, and quartets were some of the hottest selling items you could find. In 1910, Play That Barbershop Chord, which was recorded by the American Quartet, and we'll play that recording, was like at the top of the charts of Billboard magazine, which did exist back then. Nice. All right? So these were things that people all across the country were listening to, and of course, as they listened, they did what harmonizers of all ages have done. They lifted the arrangements and sang them themselves. Now, the early recordings were a cappella, the ones you've heard. It wasn't very long before they started bringing in an orchestra to, back up the quartet. The happy fact is you could still hear the voices very clearly because the orchestra was behind them. So really the quartet singing is highlighted. You might say, well, why did they have an orchestra? Well, for commercial reasons. They were not interested in preserving a barbershop style. They were interested in selling records. So here we go. This may be sped up a little bit. Sounds a little Porky Pig. This is a Civil War song. So they were singing an old song. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, waiting for the war to cease. Many are the hearts looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Painting tonight, painting on the old campground. Painting tonight. Highlighted barbershop chord. Now, we have a lot of discussion about how many barbershop sevenths should there be. Well, the old quartets may not have had all that many. There weren't all that many in that song. When they got on one, they held that sucker because they loved it. It was kind of like the recording we had of the song We Will Rest a While from Scott Joplin's opera. You notice when they got on that flat six thing. They loved it. They just enjoyed it. So it's not that there was sevenths everywhere in the music. It probably wasn't 1/3 sevenths as we sometimes want to hear. But the barbershop chords, what they thought of as the real barbershop-y chords, were enjoyed and sustained. And so the old the hallowed practice of holding chords that ring really is part of our style. It goes way back. Okay, here's another one. Now there's an orchestration behind this one. This is Stephen Foster, Masses in the Cold, Cold Ground. Again, an old song, probably from the 1850s. Bum, bum, bum. What key is that?
B flat.
A-ish. A-ish. Yeah. Okay. Now, you notice they sing a song. If we were singing, we'd probably put it in F, maybe. Okay. But then it has this low A, and about the only thing to do is put the bass on it, so the bass takes the melody. So one thing they weren't very good at is harmonizing songs that were kind of a do, what we call do to do. If the melody ranges from do to do, it probably ends with a cadence of the melody coming down. So either you put the bass on it, or have them take the low F, or if you're a women's quartet, that translates to about say a B, the bass singing the low B. Really one of the things that we've gotten good at as arranging entered the picture is treating songs whose tessitura isn't terribly friendly to hanging, 4 parts on a melody with lots of low melody notes. We just figure out ways to get around that. The old quartets just gave it to the bass, or sometimes they would even have the bass and lead doubling on the final tonic. All right, so things like that happen. High melody notes, the lead goes above the tenor. Now he's below the tenor. Same thing we do. Not good. I would say it's probably B flat or A. Probably A, because they tended to go up. Okay, so one more. This and the last one were new songs. This is a new song.
Don't be weary, you were always bright and cheery, but a tear now dims your eye. Said she, there tears of gladness, silence, there are tears of sadness. It is 50 years today since we were wed. And the old man seemed brightened, and his stern old heart is lightened, and he turns to her and said, put on your old gray mount.
So he sings the whole chorus, verse and chorus, by himself.
Down into the shade, and through the fields of clover we'll drive up to Dover on a golden wedding day. Put on your old gray bonnet, to the river on it by the hill, going up into the shade, and through the fields of clover we'll drive up to Dover on a golden wedding day.
Now, one of the things that the instrumentation did is it took away a lot of the creativity that was necessary if you're singing purely a cappella, like no tag. It just da-da-da-da-da, boom, that's it. That's it. Whereas if it had been a cappella, they probably would have been compelled to improvise some kind of ending, as you heard on those other songs that were a cappella. One of the things that I think is neat about the a cappella style is that it forces you to do what instrumentalists do to music. You've got to get the listener into the song. You may have to be creative when it comes to some sort of interlude. You've got to release the song. You've got to set down the song effectively. So that really requires some innovation on part of either the singers or an arranger. The rubato is in tempo with compromise. So it's got stretch and compress, but there basically is a very perceivable meter. Ad lib is what we do on Who'll Take My Place When I'm Gone, where you, if you listen to it, you can't imagine what the note values were. It's very conversational. So they tended to sing a rubato when they weren't singing tempo, but they did so, but it certainly had fermatas in it, like on the 7th chord that they held. But I suppose when they chose to sing in tempo, I'm sure they would have done a good job. This is the Peerless Quartet. Came around a little later after the Haydn Quartet. So here's one or two cuts from the Peerless Quartet. A cappella, very early. This is an interesting medley. Standard thing to do, right? To change the key up by a fourth. Baritone swipe. Notice it was incomplete. The bass didn't go with him. Now, if this was worked out by ear, it's a pretty remarkable accomplishment. I suspect somebody wrote something down on this. Because it's a medley with interpolations. So it's not just the composer's song off of a lead sheet. Another same key change. Something of a tag? Yeah, that was one of my first ones. I did that 1909. One thing that I notice about the change of keys, very seldom do you have a change of key in these songs. In this case, you had a medley of 3 songs. So all it did was throw in the dominant of the tonic chord and move the key up by the interval of a fourth. It did that twice. So, but in some sense, you may view that as not a real honest key change. When you go to the dominant or the subdominant, come on in, gentlemen, you are in such a related key that it may not even sound like a key change. I almost never hear in this music, and in fact of any music of this era, our standard half-step key lift. It's just non-existent. You don't hear it. And it doesn't come into barbershopping until arrangers started having a real effect. in the late 1940s. It's the first known key change I know of by a barbershop quartet of that nature, where you raise this key by a half step or a step. Was probably the Pittsburghers, which were our 48 champions. Mid-States were 49. Yeah. But that was the arrangement of a very well-known arranger in the society at the time, Molly Regan. And if you want to, and we'll actually talk about that. That'll be part of this course. Okay, I think I have another Peerless course. This isn't part of the song, it's an insertion, it's an interpolation. Notice the major triad there. Okay, there you go. That's another one of mine. So this was the kind of song that was beginning to be published by the music publishers around this area, and we're in the early 1900s now. The song is rich in secondary dominance. It goes around the circle of fifths. It uses seventh chords to go around the circle of fifths. And it became the template for the kind of song that became popular in this era. It was very harmonizable, very woodsheddable. It just does what you think it's going to do. You can sing the melody, and four reasonable singers can lay in the parts, and it's very barbershop-y in that sense. You notice, though, that when they did the Sweet Adeline, they used a major triad where they could have easily used a seventh chord. And that's not uncommon. You know, we think of the barbershop chord as being the seventh chord, and it is historically, but they also really enjoyed major chords. A lot of times, you know, the black harmonizers, when they stopped on a chord, and they would call it cracking up a chord. That cracked up chord sometimes was a seventh, sometimes it was just a major chord, and sometimes it was a diminished chord. They considered that really rich if you could wind up a phrase on that diminished chord, you know. So it's not exclusively seventh chords. Barbershoppers traditionally have relished you know, other chords in our vocabulary as well. This is Henry Burr, the lead singer, at an early age, 1904. He says he was 22 years old. An incredible voice, a little bit operatic. He sang in a formal style. I don't know if you noticed, but he kind of rolled his R's like a trained singer would do. Had a bit of vibrato. You know, he sang kind of an opera style barbershop lead. Didn't call it barbershop. Called themselves a male quartet. And this is the tenor, Albert Campbell, from 1892. And again, a heck of a voice, full voice tenor, just a real tenor. And he was a famous fellow. Campbell and Burr actually recorded a lot of duets, and it's kind of interesting. I don't know why the other two members of the quartet might have been in the bar or something. But they sang a lot of songs, just the two of them. And they're songs that could so easily have been harmonized in four parts. But here's one of their well-known duets. This is a song that we sing in barbershop. Baritones and basses, you can fill in your part. gonna say, sweet things you say. We're going to be that I won't. Will you keep your eyes behind? Will you forget the loving time you had? Will you needs that swipe or echo, doesn't it? Needs that barbershop chord there. All right, there you have it. So anyway, back to history. This is the American Quartet, and you can see that it has some personality you've seen before. This guy and this guy sang with the Haydn Quartet, and he was with an early version of the Peerless Quartet. So, and this guy was new. So these were three veterans and a new guy from off the vaudeville stage. It was very rare for a vaudevillian to start being a recording studio guy. And now I don't know if you'll notice or not, because you may say all these old quartets sound the same, but he sings quite differently. He sings in the vernacular. There's no formal training. There's no rolled R's. He sings dialect. You know, he sings like a pop singer. So it's a little bit different, and it was a new twist on quartetting that really was appropriate, because this is the music of the people, and it's not formal music. So anyway, let's listen to a little bit of American Quartet. He's the lead. Again, this is a new song. Not an old song, it's a new song. Right off the press. And so on. Okay. Here's another one. Another new song. These were brand new songs. Tin Pan Alley songs. So one of the unfortunate things, as we said, about the instrumentation is it does what we like to do vocally. No tag. So you wore a tulip, a bright yellow tulip, and I wore a big red rose, and then you have the instrumentation, bump, 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 the pickup, you know. So it's doing what we like to do vocally. So I think that's a good reason why, as I said before, we like a cappella. We like to furnish all of the propellants in the music. The a cappella passage. So that has all the qualities of the later quartet recordings. You notice by now the special effects are kind of taken over, all right? And the instrumentation becomes a very prominent part of the recording. Another great moments in history. I love this one. That says it all, right? That's a good editorial about barbershopping. What kind of songs do we sing? This is just a montage of various recording artists at the time, and it included Jeffrey O'Hara, who was both a singer and a composer. He recorded certain formal songs, and he wrote certain pop songs. He wrote, Katie, you know that song, Beautiful Katie, you're the only good girl that I adore. Stuttering song, wouldn't sing that these days, you'd never get away with it. He also wrote sort of formal things like Give a Man a Horse He Can Ride, But he also was the author of The Old Songs, The Good Old Songs for Me, which he wrote in 1921. I'll talk more about that. He was interested in barbershop harmony, by the way. You see Billy Murray, you see Henry Burr. This is funny. The sheet music of the day clearly was advertising. You know, there was a huge musical advertising. So companies would pay to have their product named in either the title of the song or the lyrics of the song. So there were songs like "In My Merry Oldsmobile," you know. These songs, and there were songs that lots of songs mentioned my Victrola or whatever. So this was the best example I could find of that.
David, where were these singers based? Is it New York City?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is all based in New York City. The publishing, the recording, it was the Hollywood of its day as far as the entertainment is concerned. Now, keep in mind though, we're only getting a small slice of the barbershop tradition here. This is the commercialized side of it. Out on the streets, there were still quartets singing. And out in vaudeville, there were still quartets singing. So they were different venues. This is the professional side of it. They were recording. And of course, it's the one that we have most preserved because that's what it did. It gave you something that was recorded. We don't have that kind of rich record of what went on the vaudeville stage, the Chautauqua stage, of course, what people sang informally. At this point, you know, I flashed this slide several times. You'll see it more than once during the week. But this is my attempt at come up with a real synopsis of what barbershop is. We've been trying to define it ever since our society began. In fact, even before that, Sigmund Spaeth and Jeffrey O'Hara in the 1920s offered characteristics of barbershop. But to me, these are the most important things. And this is my editorial. It is consonant four-part harmony a cappella, solid voicings, harmonic variety, few passing tones. That all make sense? Anybody need any clarification with that? So consonant entails singing chords that appear low in the harmonic series. So that means major triad, seventh chords, minor, minor seventh. These are very natural chords that appear in the overtone series. As far as the parts, melody in the second tenor, a first tenor above, bass usually on solid chord tones, meaning roots and fifths. Baritones filling in, taking what's left. Embellishment, swipes, echoes, back times, whatever, bell chords. Many involving non-homophonic devices, but they continually converge to homophonic chords. Barbershop is not strictly homophonic, but I find that it tends to go towards the homophonic. The cadence of the song ends up with four voices on a matched vowel, matched word sound that they can lock. Even though you have a bell chord, it still goes back to being homophonic, keeps reverting to that. Freedom with the song. Its roots are entwined with the birth of jazz, which does improvisation. Our style, we may not be improvising when we sing an arrangement, but our style is based on improvisation. And all improvisational styles take the composer's song and do something with it. May or may not be what the composer envisioned. It may or may not be what the composer likes. Chords tuned with an ear towards lock and ring, meaning they gravitate towards a just intonation. Now, I hesitated to put that as definition. When defining any style, you can't define it such that a bad performance of that style is no longer in the style. Unfortunately, we have to own up to bad barbershop. It's still barbershop. It can be over-embellished. It can be out of tune. It can have all kinds of warts on it, but we recognize it as being barbershop. So I'm careful to say chords tuned with an ear towards lock and ring. In all ages, I find the singers achieving various degrees of success, but I believe they're always singing acoustically and their ear is towards tuning and locking, whatever degree of success they achieve. Avon Comedy 4. Now this is a bit of a rare situation. They were a vaudeville quartet. That means they sang in front of live audiences. Rarely did those quartets record, but this quartet was so popular, they became so well known that the studios wanted to bring them in and recording. So here's the Avon Comedy 4. Here's what a quartet sounds like that was actually live singers, and they do have orchestration behind them. It's got a routine. Cowboys and Indians. Kind of a neat little back time in the arrangement. Duet, solo and duet pickups. Notice how in subtle ways it highlights the lead voice a lot. Kind of a tag. Pretty neat. Yeah, they actually made the cover of sheet music. This is a well-known song, Don't Bring Lulu. There they are on the cover. So we'll conclude, but I just want to make the following remark. Technology removes us a long way from these singers. It sounds kind of corny and old, and they kind of sound the same, and they got that scratchy quality in the recording. But if any of the quartets we were listening to were standing here singing, you would say that they were an impressive cast of singers. I mean, their singing would be old-fashioned, but resonant, big voices. We would love them. We would be absolutely delighted by what they were singing. I wish we could experience that, because we're so, the connection between us and them is so separated by technology or the failure of technology that we only get a hint at what these guys sounded like. So anyway, tomorrow we're going to keep going through the Golden Age. I'm hoping we get up at least close to, the beginning of the society. So we're going to get up close to 1938. What we're going to see is that this tradition, or this music, which really had a heyday, really a heyday in the United States, kind of declined. And the reason for that decline was probably changes in society and changes in entertainment. Because entertainment moved from New York to California, and with it, the barbershop thing kind of vanished as well. Did it disappear? No. There were lingering quartets singing, but they became kind of retro. So even in the 1930s, a retro thing to do was to have a barbershop quartet singing something. And as a matter of fact, Wheaties did exactly that. There was the Wheaties Quartet, and they were retro. They sang Wheaties commercials, and that was something everybody could glom onto because they remembered just a few years ago, wow, this thing was really popular. So, with that, I will turn you loose, and we'll see you tomorrow.